It comes and goes. We're out here chasing a feeling. Up high, down low. We go from the floor to the ceiling.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feels Out Loud, brought to you by Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. This is your host, Tara Martini, along with the fabulous Becky McNattin. We're glad to have you listening as we live and share stories of mental health.
And Tara, we're processing a very important topic on our show today, and we are so grateful to have special guest Ryan Fouts with us for the entire show. Thank you for being here, Ryan.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Through the next hour, we are processing mental health care for LGBTQ plus youth. And this is a critical, and I'm going to say essential topic to discuss because the information around mental health struggles for LGBTQ plus communities is profound. Profound. According to the Trevor Project report released in 2024, 66% of LGBTQ plus youth ages 13 to 17 endorse anxiety, and 53% report depressive symptoms. 39% of LGBTQ teens and young adults have seriously considered attempting suicide in the last year. 39%. This includes 46% of transgender and non-binary teens and adults. That's almost half. That is almost half, listeners. And 12% of these youth did make a suicide attempt in the last year. I just threw out a lot of stats. Ryan, what are your thoughts about all of those?
Yeah. It's a lot to take in.
Yes.
And it is sad to read and hear that is the reality that young people are facing today, but it is the reality that young people are facing today in our current social and political climate. I will say, those numbers that you quoted, I believe, are from the national version of the survey, and they did cut out Minnesota-specific numbers. It is a little bit better in Minnesota, but not much. So not enough to be like, yay, let's celebrate. So much better here.
Go us.
But it is a little bit better. But the mental health concerns of queer and trans youth are very real, very life-threatening. And deserves a lot of attention and focus to create a space where they can live lives just as healthy and comfortably as their straight and cisgender counterparts. So. Yeah,
both in a discussion around what is helpful, what's working, and what isn't. What isn't offered. And we're going to talk through all of that today. Wanted to hear a little bit more about you.
Yeah. So I'm a social worker by background. Most of my career has been focused on working with youth in some capacity. I started working with homeless and street involved youth, doing street outreach, case management, things like that, out on the West Coast. And within the homeless youth community, LGBTQ plus youth are greatly overrepresented in that community. So that has been sort of a part of my process and my experience pretty much my whole career. I've been in the Twin Cities for about 5 years. I've been at Reclaim for about 4 years. I just love working with youth and young adults, creating spaces and opportunity for them to become their best selves. So
that's incredible. What makes you passionate about working with trans youth, queer and trans youth?
Yeah. Thinking back to my own journey, when I was a teenager, I started really questioning my own sexuality and, beginning to come to the realization that I didn't think I was straight, but absolutely did not feel safe, did not have any sort of outlet to turn to. I grew up in a rural community in Kansas, and there was no one to turn to say, hey, I got to talk about this. So, kind of silently went through some depression. And so I'm really passionate about places like Reclaim to create spaces for youth today that I didn't have when I was.
Wow.
That's beautiful.
Wow. So you did something about it.
Well, such an important topic. We're going to take a short commercial break, but stay tuned as we explore further mental health care for LGBTQ teens and adults, young adults. Thank you for listening to Feels Out Loud, and we will be back in just a moment.
All you got to do now you see is danger, trying to find what you lost.
Welcome back to Feels Out Loud, brought to you by Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. I am Trevor Martini along with Becky McNattin. Let's dive right back into our discussion on mental health for LGBTQ plus teenagers and young adults.
And it really is a critical topic that we're covering today because we had mentioned in the last segment, young people are experiencing high rates of mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I have so many questions for you, Ryan. I know Tara does too. What do you see as critical mental health needs for queer and trans youth?
There are many, but I think the first thing that comes to mind is, all of the, the statistics we talked about in the last session really come down to a need for safety.
Yeah.
And that is a huge, really foundational thing that is missing for a lot of LGBTQ plus youth. Is just a sense of safety in some situations has maybe been completely taken away from them. Maybe, home may not be safe, schools may not be safe, broader community is becoming more and more unsafe. The whole country is beginning to feel more and more unsafe. So if you lack that basic sense of safety, it makes it that much harder to be able to take care of those deeper parts of yourself. And that's where that depression and anxiety, thoughts of suicide, that's where those come in, just because that core need for safety that we all crave and desire and really need as people has been just, in some cases forcibly taken away from folks.
That makes so much sense. And kids and young adults are bombarded with this in terms of messaging all of the time.
Well, and it's just also something that people just inherently deserve to have a sense of safety and peace. And it's just remarkable that in the worst way possible that they don't have it. What are some unique mental health challenges for LGBTQ plus youth today?
Yeah, I think, some of the top things that we see, again, are kind of what we were just talking about, depression and anxiety, being able to process the impact of the trauma that they're experiencing, the discrimination and oppression that they're experiencing, and the trauma that just like sort of compounds and builds into their core, their body. Really finding a space where there can be that sense of safety to do exploration. That's a big part of what we do at Reclaim in our therapy work, is just, that's one of the big reasons that young people work with us, is to be able to have like that space for, I'm not sure what my gender is, or I think I know what it is, but I want to talk through it. So just creating that space for exploration, for questioning, for just kind of, trying some different things out. That's a really common thing for teenagers and young adults. It's like, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try this part of my identity. Oh, that didn't work. I'm going to try, so just really creating that opportunity within a safe space that people can really just explore and start that journey of a greater sense of understanding of who they are. And then recognizing that identity journey, for all of us is ongoing and it's lifelong, but kind of helping to really get that process going with folks in a place where they know that they can be safe, and that sort of the entirety of their identities can be held and supported and acknowledged. I think is really key for queer and trans youth and young adults. So
and so I referenced the Trevor Project in the last segment, that national report in 2024 that shared that 90% of LGBTQ plus youth note that the current political climate has negatively impacted their well-being. And more specifically, just last week, I heard from a young person that was asking really poignant questions to me of, so does passage of this new bill mean that people are going to seek me out now, trans youth who I'm close to in my life? And although the bill doesn't say anything specifically about that, it spoke to this idea of the political climate and the messaging that is happening all of the time of new, as you said earlier, very poignantly, rights being taken. That, I'm assuming you're seeing this, of this 90% that are impacted by the the current political climate, but what would you say about it? And how are you seeing the impact lived out in the work that you do at Reclaim?
Yeah, I think in terms of the impact, I mean, from everything that I hear from our therapists, yes, I mean, this is a huge part of conversations of therapy sessions right now, is not only the sort of, intrapersonal work that our clients are doing with their therapist, but yeah, just kind of needing to take a step back and have those questions of how are you navigating, how are you taking care of yourself in the midst of all of the chaos that's going on in our country. And so, kind of really seeing it as, kind of taking a step back and really just focusing on some of those basic safety, core processes that young people can do for themselves to find safety, to find their own sort of personal power, kind of really trying to keep in mind, like, what, there's so much in our country that you don't have control over. What are some of the things that you really can lean into having control over, in your own life and your own experience and your own relationships? There was another thought that I had with that. I think, what was the other part of the question?
It's okay.
I think you mostly answered it. You answered it around how do you see it operationalized in the work that you're doing, and oh, go ahead.
I think too, part of what we really try to focus on is, I think a lot, with a lot of the laws coming out, and executive orders and court cases, and that's meant, part of why that's happening is meant to create chaos, to create fear, to create uncertainty.
Yes.
So I think what we all at Reclaim try to communicate, and what I would say directly to anyone who's in our community, but especially to young people, is like, these laws, these executive orders, they don't change who you are as a person.
Right.
We've existed far before any of this has happened. We will exist far beyond any of this happening. Legislation doesn't dictate our existence. And so, really holding on to that power as well of, we are so much more than laws and orders and pieces of paper and bills and all of those things. Like, we are people, and we're not going anywhere regardless of what anyone tries to say or do about us. So
that's beautiful.
And those bills or executive orders do not speak or represent every human standing around you.
Exactly.
Right. You are still surrounded with love and support.
Exactly.
And sharing that consistent message. And, I think for us as therapists as well is just sending that message of what can you control, like you said. What a daunting task, though, for you and everyone at your workplace, of that idea of, just like we're doing, like, okay, what can you control and how to feel safe, when yet everything around you, you're just inundated with all these messages from the political side of things. But I think if we can stay consistent and just, sharing that same message is so important for them to keep hearing it and believing it.
Right.
Exactly.
So about half of youth note that they are not able to access mental health care. What are some barriers to treatment for LGBTQ plus youth regarding mental health care?
Yeah, and that number is pretty consistent here in Minnesota. It was 46% of youth in
Minnesota. Okay.
Specifically LGBTQ youth who wanted mental health care but couldn't get it. The top 5 reasons that the Trevor Project noted, number 1 was fear about discussing their mental health concerns with someone. The second one was concerns about being able to pay for care.
Okay.
And then the remaining 3, and I forget if I'm doing them in the right order, but the remaining 3 were, fears about having to get parental permission to get care, fear that they wouldn't be taken seriously if they discuss their mental health concerns. And then I think the 5th reason is just an outright belief that, like, mental health care is not going to work for them.
It just breaks my heart.
Yeah, it's all very sad and depressing to hear that. So I think in a lot of those situations, folks maybe just even think that it's not even worth it to try.
Sure.
Because there's just so much anxiety about even like reaching out for help, or they're worried that they're not going to find the right place, or if they do reach out, someone's not going to like respond appropriately or in a helpful way, and it's just going to create more harm. So I think in a lot of those situations, youth don't even reach out. So I think it's an important moment to make sure to mention, for anyone who's listening, that for outpatient mental health services, which is what Reclaim is, the age of consent is now down to 16. It used to be 18 until just like a year and a half ago, but it's 16 now. So someone who is 16 or older can reach out and can work with us, and we can work with them to bypass having to get parental permission if needed. Folks can consent on their own. They don't have to have parental permission. They can involve and can do parental permission and have their families involved as well. But if there's a reason that they can't, we can work with them. And we have mechanisms in place to be able to do that and figure out finances and all of those things as well.
That's huge in terms of at least addressing one barrier, which can be for young adults and youth, this sort of familial support needed. Sometimes has been legally required for people under 18 in the past, that they have to sign off on that. And if parents say no, then the youth are not getting it. Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, the way that I frame it when I talk about it is, if somebody can start working with us at 16 versus 18, that's 2 more years of time that we can work with that young person to try to minimize the impact of things like depression, anxiety, substance use.
Well, just the trauma, to be able to work through that with them.
Exactly. So that gives us 2 more years of opportunity to.
And as you talked about identity exploration and identity creation, that is what adolescence is for humankind. Through adolescence and young adulthood. And you have 2 more years in a safe space for someone to identity create.
So huge.
That's very important. So along the additional statistics that have come out about the experiences for queer and trans youth, 23% of LGBTQ plus youth and 28% of transgender and non-binary youth report that they've been physically threatened or harmed in the last year due to their sexual orientation or gender identity. We're talking about 1/4 of youth. And this is trauma. What kind of, how does this kind of trauma influence the services you provide and the processing that you are all doing at Reclaim?
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, because that is such a high prevalence, that's part of the conversation that our therapists are having with young people, is to talk very openly, about experiences they've had and how that does impact them on both a physical level and on an emotional and mental level. And then, if someone is in a space where they want to be able to sort of process and work through that, then, our therapists are working with them to look at what that, to really explore with them and kind of co-create what that, treatment, for lack of a better word, would look like for them to kind of really be able to unpack that, sort of set that pain aside, sort of be able to have that recognition of, sort of that separation of like, this horrible event happened to you. It is not you yourself. It is not part of you. It's something that happened to you. How can you really still hold on to the core of your identity? Really just supporting that differentiation, I think is really key to help create that road towards recovery and long-term resilience. So.
And definitely gets at, as you mentioned before, this core need for safety that 1/4 or more, because that's what's reported. That's what the report knows. But 1/4 around their youth have experienced actual threats to physical safety. So that isn't even the emotional or psychological safety. So there is this real lived experience of safety being not available. And it sounds like a beautiful strategy in helping someone say, this has occurred in my life. This has happened to me. It isn't me.
Exactly.
Yep. It's not who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it's also that idea of working with a teenager who is still trying to figure out, like you said, the human experience of who am I, right, in this world, and then realizing the trauma that's taken place and that fight or flight or freeze mode of the trauma that's occurred. So every day, even just walking down the street, of your brain is adjusting every second and not in that calm space or regulated space. And so it's working through, using different modalities and things like that to get them to that more regulated space takes so much time. And so that is a large undertaking, but thank goodness they have therapists and the resources available at Reclaim that, that they can work on them, with those things, because my goodness, these kiddos, they're just going through so much.
Sometimes even knowing that the trauma response is occurring.
Yes.
Because that becomes normative.
Well, and that's the thing. They don't know a life without that, right? They think this is the norm. Well, I've always felt like that. Oh, honey, that's the trauma.
Right.
That is your norm.
Yeah. And something too that I think is coming to mind, for people who experience violence, from the folks who perpetrate the violence towards them, there's, and sometimes it's subliminal and sometimes it's, actually spoken, but there's sort of this message of like, you deserve to receive this violence. Like, I think that's especially important for LGBTQ youth to remember, like,
absolutely
like
hear that.
That is absolutely a lie. Like, you don't deserve, like,
well, that's psychological,
right.
Yeah.
There's nothing
impact
about who you are and your like identity that like says this is okay. No, it's absolutely not okay. Like, this other person's, discriminatory belief against you there, is not you. It's not okay.
Yeah.
You don't have to kind of just accept that.
But you might be the first adult that's ever said that to them, right?
Possibly. Yeah, especially if they're coming from a not super supportive home.
Yeah.
In an isolated environment.
It's a really good point, Tara, because it makes me think about, you said that part of your passion in working in this field is providing care and access to care that you didn't have. What do you see as the importance? I know this is a really big question, but what do you see as the importance of role models in promoting mental wellness for queer and trans youth and young adults?
Yeah, I mean that is honestly one of the biggest things. Research shows that if an LGBTQ young person can identify even one supportive adult in their life, that alone can drastically reduce all of those mental health concerns. Their depression would be lower, anxiety, concerns about harming themselves, like all of those things are going to be lower simply from like being able to say, I know I've got at least one person in my corner, and that's
incredible.
That can be a parent or a caregiver or another family member. That can be a teacher. That can be, someone who's part of your faith community, like your neighbor down the street. It doesn't necessarily, it doesn't have to be like just a professional. Like it can be just, even one supportive adult in their life.
One good human.
Yeah. Like that alone makes a huge difference. So, and then tied to that, really simple things, especially like, for trans and gender expansive youth, things like, if someone's using different pronouns or sort of testing different pronouns, in the grand scheme of things, something very simple, like actually respecting their pronouns. That there was one year, I think it was in 2020 or 2021, where the Trevor Project found that alone dropped the risk for suicide by over 50%.
That alone.
So, and in the grand scheme of things, having the like, oh, you use she, her pronouns. Cool. I can do that. Like,
what a simple,
really not that hard. So,
but complex. I mean, I'm minimizing the impact on the person. What a simple thing we can do.
Right. Yeah.
That's, and as you said, when you are offering programming to kids, if you are the one safe adult or supportive adult, you might be the person, and our listeners could be that person for a young person as well, to say, you are safe with me. You are not owed. You don't deserve the treatment if you have experienced fill in the blank. That has a huge impact. The huge impact. I mean, you just said it can reduce suicidality by 50%. Speaks to the power of what you all are offering in terms of programming. And we were wanting to talk today about the ways that affirming spaces, just supportive spaces, influence mental health and coping for young people. I think you just said it. And well, it's essential, actually. And the influence is that it doesn't require a lot and has huge rippled effect. Walk us through what does the programming look like at Reclaim?
Sure. Yeah. So Reclaim's focus is to provide financially accessible, specialized mental health care to queer and trans youth. So our age range is 12 to 25, and our core focus is providing that direct mental health care. So most of our work is through individual therapy, but we also do family therapy, couples and relationship therapy. We've historically done group work, and we're in the process of reviving group therapy processes as well. But that is the crux of the work, is to do that direct mental health support. We really, so we take insurance. We take most major insurance plans. We use that when we can. But when folks don't have insurance, can't meet co-pays, or in a lot of cases, they're scared to use their insurance,
Right.
because of what might happen to their records. We have an equity-based sliding scale. So we look at things like their security with transportation and housing and food and things like that. And that is used to help identify a potential number that they can contribute towards their therapy. And that's a conversation between the young person and their therapist. And if there's a situation where a young person can't pay, okay. And they still get the same care that every other young person does.
So you make it very accessible. That's incredible.
Yeah. We also sort of alongside our therapy work, we do parent and caregiver consultation sessions to family members. And these can be parents or caregivers who don't have youth who are our clients. Like, this is kind of open to anyone. These are sessions where parents and caregivers can talk with a staff member and really have their own process. Especially if you're a parent or a caregiver, when your child comes out, it's a huge experience for you as well. It's a journey. You have questions, you have concerns. Like, even if you're very supportive, it's a big deal. And you're going to be on your own journey. Like, especially, there might be grief involved in your journey because you had sort of maybe one vision for your child, and that feels like it's shifting to something else. And so that's why we created those spaces, was to give parents and caregivers an opportunity to be able to work through that a little bit. But really what we encourage and challenge parents and caregivers around is, don't do that work with your child. Do that separately. Like, your child's
do that on your own.
Exactly. Like, your child can't also be your therapist. You need to find your own support and work through your own process, and absolutely take that time and feel the feelings that you have and ask the questions and have the concerns. Just do it separately from your child. So and then we also do a lot of just sort of broader training and consultation work to other providers, businesses, other nonprofits, things like that, to really help support other groups and organizations to better serve the queer and trans folks that they're working with. And then I'll also mention We also can do all of that work that I just talked about. We can do all of that support in Spanish as well. So all of our services,
Wow.
including our therapy services and the parent and caregiver consultations, we can also provide in Spanish.
That's amazing.
That is so impressive. Now, do you do any virtual work?
We do. Yeah. All of our office is in St. Paul. And so that's where we're based. And that's where our therapists, with the exception of we have one contract therapist who lives and works out of Two Harbors.
That's not a bad place to work out of.
Yeah. But most of our team is at our office in St. Paul. But every single one of our therapists has a hybrid blend of in-person clients and virtual clients. And with our virtual clients, our service area is the entire state.
Okay.
So any young person inside Minnesota could reach out and work with us.
And if they reached out, how would they get placed with a therapist?
Yeah. So there's 3 key ways that someone can reach out. They could call and kind of leave a message on our services line. There's an email, but we mostly encourage folks to go directly to our website. And there's a button right on the homepage that says request services. And it takes you to sort of an initial intake form. And you can fill that out. If you are the person seeking therapy, you can fill it out. If you're, say, like a social worker referring or like a school counselor, you can also fill it out for someone else and submit that. And then we have an intake coordinator who reaches out to folks and talks through sort of the process. Some folks might have, you might have like a BIPOC young person who wants to work with one of our BIPOC therapists. And so we try to figure that out and match folks as much as we can. Or maybe they're a young person who is exploring their gender, and so they would like to work with a trans provider. So we try to do that match as much as possible. And then also, we might just have an open conversation of like, I hear that you'd like to work with provider A because of X, Y, and Z. To be honest, they're full right now. They're not taking, would you like to, do you want to be on a wait list and wait?
Yeah.
Can we connect you with another therapist? We have other resources that we could share with you, and like you could reach out, to these other clinics and see if you can get care there, or connect back with us if you need to. So, but we always try as much as possible to be able to do that best match between what the young person's looking for and who we have on our team at that moment.
Got it.
Very cool.
And you mentioned group programming, at least in the past. And we just did a show actually on the power of groups, kind of in a supportive atmosphere. Could you speak to that and how that, I would imagine that kids who are in individual therapy would find a huge benefit in group participation with each other.
Yeah, it's been interesting because we had been struggling for a while to get sort of a critical mass of folks to be able to, and it, it's a lot of like, this time works for some of the people.
Logistics.
A lot of it was just
very
like logistics,
difficult.
but yeah, like, one of the core groups that we've historically offered is like a gender exploration group. And the big focus of that is to be able to like have conversation with your peers around what exactly is gender. And throughout the course of that group, like a couple of different models of gender are presented, and sort of like, here's this version of how gender is described. What do we think? And how does that fit with you?
Cool.
And so yeah, I think there really can be, something very powerful about that sort of peer connection. And that's something we've been talking about more so recently, especially with social and political context right now of, maybe even not necessarily like a therapeutic group, but creating peer spaces where the youth we're serving can really come together, kind of like in solidarity.
Sure.
And community. And so we're sort of in some exploration right now of like what that could look like.
Yeah.
I love that.
In that part of what we were talking about in our previous episode was the impact of belonging. And so when you feel like you are part of something beyond you, how that influences our mental health in ways that are hard to measure. Really cool that you would be thinking about as an organization, how do we do that? I know logistics do play. They're hard. Timing, who leads,
Yeah. Is it
How
in
are-
person? Is it
Yes.
Yeah,
online?
all the things.
Yeah.
how are people included or not included? So, in a kind of broad way, who's a good fit for your programming?
Yeah. I kind of described there's sort of two broad groups of young people who reach out to us. The first group is young people who are maybe not sure where they're at in terms of their identity. They are in a process of exploring their gender or their sexuality, or they have questions or concerns about what that looks like. So if you were to say, are you LGBTQ? They might be like, I don't know.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that is sort of the focus of their work with us, is to do that identity exploration process. And that's really sort of the key support that they're looking for. I think a second group of folks that reach out to work with us is youth who, are further along in their identity journey and know that they're in some way part of the LGBTQ plus community, but they want to work at a place like Reclaim where they know that their identity will be understood. And
They're safe.
Yeah.
Safe. And where they'll be understood, and where their identity won't sort of impact or get in the way of the treatment, but their focus isn't necessarily on their identity. It's on, ADHD or depression or,
Absolutely get that.
So they're wanting to focus on another type of mental health concern, but they know that if they disclose that they're non-binary, like their therapist isn't going to be like, wait, what? I don't get it, So, so those are, I think, kind of the two sort of broad groups of folks that work
That
with
makes
us.
so much sense. And so we guess you get asked this question with some frequency. What happens at 25? Like when people sort of age out of your age group of focus?
When we say 25, we do through the 25th year. And we really try within that timing to, bridge to some other type of connection as much as possible. So if they're still in a space where they're feeling that, maybe if they're like, I feel like I'm pretty good right now, then it might just be like, okay, well, let's just kind of wrap up this treatment episode and
Graduating kind of in a sense.
But, in those situations where they're maybe not, like, we will work with them to try to find other resources that we might be able to do a really like solid connection and handoff to support them in continued work. And it is something we're thinking about, maybe we go through 26 because there's also, 25 is that year that like if you're on insurance, you get dropped from your family's insurance. And, so that is something we're talking about as well.
It's a factor.
Yeah. Age always comes up for us. Sometimes someone will be like, I have someone who's 10. Can you help them? And we're like, no.
Yes.
And it's not so much because we have like a contract or a requirement. It's mostly about, especially for younger folks, it's mostly just about like the skill sets on the team that we have. It is very different to work with like an 8-year-old than like a 22-year-old.
Yes.
So just really kind of framing it to like what we can best ethically offer in terms of treatment and care. So
and being able to give the resources for the people who might call who are outside of that window.
Exactly.
And of course, lots of outpatient work is episodic care. People might not get seen for the entirety of their youth and young adulthood, but that if they call back and are close to that 25 or so age range, you might say, here's some other places to call. Yeah.
So you mentioned, you'd said you can go to the website or reach out by phone. What is your website? And
it is www.reclaim.care.
.care. Okay. And if someone is, sitting there right now saying, I don't know if I should reach out, you're saying, please do. You're saying, call us and maybe explore your website.
Exactly.
See what you all are sharing and noting on your website. I'm just so struck by this conversation today. It's left me thinking a ton of things about how important human connection is. We talk about that on our show all the time, but really how it cannot be discounted. That the connection with other people, regardless of what the presenting issue, matters so much. And
Well, particularly now.
Right
I
now.
think there's no greater time than now.
We are headed to a commercial break, but when we come back, we will talk through listener questions about mental health care specifically for LGBTQ plus teens and young adults. We will process your feels in just a moment.
Nobody else. All you got to do now. Nothing to lose. In a world full of strangers, you don't know that's right.
We are back again with Feels Out Loud. And this part of the show is where we talk through questions from our beautiful listeners. If you have a question related to mental wellness, sharing feelings, or our topics for each week that you would like us to process through, please visit our website at becomingtogethermn.com and find the Feels Out Loud page to submit a question directly, or email us at contact@becomingtogethermn.com. Of course, follow us on social media as well. We really do want to hear from you and what you are wondering about.
And we do want to hear from people.
Yes,
and,
we do.
I'm so proud of the people who reached out around questions about the topic that we've been talking about today.
Me too.
Ryan, we've had several people ask us things about the topic that we've talked through today. And one of our listeners said, how can I offer mental health support to my young adult child who is transitioning? And what kind of feedback would you give?
You could encourage them to reach out to Reclaim. That's one. You know, if they're within the age range and looking for that formal help. I think conversation is always a great place to start. Saying, you know, well, two things. I think even before conversation, consent is a great place to start. So kind of like, hey, it would be, I'm wondering if we can talk about certain things. Is that okay? Kind of having that establishment with your child. And then just opening chances for a dialogue around, are they having any questions or concerns or fears or anxieties? You know, if in this situation, if it's a young adult, like, you know, maybe as the caregiver, you know, in that space, you can be a little bit more maybe, you know, kind of maybe talking about some of your own concerns, or sort of kind of reflecting back on what things were like for you when you were a young adult, and maybe, you know, kind of drawing comparison between, you know, here's what it was like for me. How are things for you? Like, you know, but yeah, I think just starting with that, like, acknowledgement of like, I'm here and I'm open to having a dialogue about whatever you'd like to talk about. And I think I think there's a lot of, and whether or not it's, you know, around just mental health concerns in general, or if it's around LGBTQ specific stuff, there's a lot of, I think folks have anxiety and they're nervous about like making a mistake or messing up or saying the wrong thing.
Right.
And as gently and nicely as I can say it, yeah, you're going to mess up and you're going to make mistakes. So,
yes,
you know,
well
but
said.
it's okay.
Yeah, part of me is like, you know, get over it, because you're going to mess, you know, like, and that's okay. Like, but I think having that acknowledgement with someone in your life saying like, I you know, I know that I'm going to mess up, and when I do, if I don't catch it, please tell me. If something hurts, please tell me.
Yeah.
I will do what I can to, you know, fix that. But like having that acknowledgement too of, you know, because young people aren't expecting like, okay, I just made this change in my identity and get it right and be, you know,
right.
Like, we're all people and we're all on our own journey. And so being able to have that acknowledgement too of like, I might not have answers for you. I might not say the right thing. I might not know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm also kind of freaking out, you know, like just having your own vulnerability, I think can go a long way.
Well, and you're saying such an important aspect about one thing that we can do is really work on ourselves to be approachable.
Right.
to receive feedback about how we're showing up in relationship.
Mhm.
One way that this listener can offer mental health support to their child is by thinking about how am I showing up,
Mhm.
and am I in a space where I can receive the feedback about when I do mess up?
Right. Well,
We have
and-
huge ability to control that. And wow, thank you, Ryan. We're at the end of our show already for today. And thank you, everybody, for listening this morning. Join us next week as we keep talking through more mental health focused topics. And in the week ahead, everyone, be kind to yourself. Remember that connection fosters wellness, and your voice is one that the world around you needs to hear. Share yourselves, friends.
Some do.